A major scandal broke out today, first between Donald Trump's administration and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and then also with the Europeans. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio accused Volodymyr Zelensky of lying when he said that the American delegation was pushing Ukraine to surrender Donbas to Putin in exchange for American security guarantees. In response, Zelensky said that it would be better if Trump's team kept quiet because he only revealed the tip of the iceberg. And there may come a time when he will be forced to publicly reveal the whole truth about the Trump administration's ties with the Russians. After that, Marco Rubio said that the American weapons intended for Ukraine will now definitely go to the Middle East, as Trump's team took offense. Moreover, at yesterday's G7 ministers' meeting, Marco Rubio even told the Europeans that they should deal with Russia's war against Ukraine on their own from now on. Well, now Trump just wants to walk away and give Putin a complete carte blanche. And that's how it is. Rubio is responding to the Europeans' call not to lift sanctions on Russia, but on the contrary, to put even more pressure. Overall, the situation is not looking good, and it seems like Trump is looking for a public excuse to walk away from the negotiations. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel. You can do this by subscribing, donating, or becoming a sponsor on YouTube. How to do this? All the links and details are in the description of this video or via the QR code on your screens. At the end of the episode, if you find this information important and necessary, you can support this channel, including financially. I would be grateful for that. And also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link to it is also in the description of this video. So, the administration of Donald Trump is clearly angry at Europe and Ukraine, and now it seems is ready to take revenge. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the words of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about security guarantees in exchange for the withdrawal of Ukrainian armed forces from Donbas a lie. According to him, Washington supposedly did not set any conditions for Ukraine regarding the withdrawal. Here is the quote. "That's a lie. I saw Zelensky say this, and it's upsetting that he says that because he knows it's not true. The Ukrainian authorities were told something different. It was about the fact that security guarantees would not come into effect until the war was over. But this wasn't connected to the condition that he would have to give up territory. I don't know why he says such things. It's simply not true." In response, Zelensky insists that this is exactly how the US is behaving and Marco Rubio is just trying to dodge responsibility. Ukraine will receive security guarantees from the US only after the war is over, which is now linked to the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the territory of Donbas. And here Zelensky said that in reality he has revealed only a small part of what went on behind the scenes in the negotiations. Quote, "You know how they say most of the iceberg is not visible. But believe me, I showed the smaller part. I'm being completely frank. You can phrase it, you can say it differently, but the meaning stays the same." In addition, Zelensky said that Kyiv had offered Washington a compromise option to sign off on security guarantees even before the war is over if Trump's team is sure that Putin really wants peace. So what's the problem then? The idea was to prepare the documents in advance so that the US Congress could finalize and vote on them directly at the stage of ending the conflict. However, the American side rejected this proposal, insisting that both the signing and the provision of guarantees are only possible at the moment of a complete ceasefire. Quote from Zelensky, "I said that the guarantees would not take effect until the end of the war, so there is nothing to be afraid of here. But nevertheless, we were told that the issue is not when this comes into force, but when these guarantees are given to us. But the whole problem is that this way there's a risk that Trump, will just deceive and betray us. So, once again, Ukraine is being offered to first give Donbas to Vladimir Putin, withdraw its troops, sign a peace agreement, and commit under this agreement not to attack Russians on Ukrainian soil. And only after that is Donald Trump ready to discuss security guarantees. I'm not even mentioning that after that, they still need Congress approval and ratification. But where is the guarantee that Trump will keep his word? Well, his deadlines and ultimatums, we all know them very well by now. Moreover, all sides of the negotiations admit this. As of today, the key condition for ending the war and receiving American security guarantees remains the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the territory of Donbas. This is due to the hardline position of the Russian Federation, which demands control over the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. But Marco Rubio did not stop there. He admitted that the US may redirect weapons that were intended for Ukraine to conduct an operation in the Middle East. And the argument is pretty banal. Rubio insists that the US actually doesn't owe anyone anything. Here is his quote. "This isn't someone else's weapon. This is our weapon. These are sales. These are military sales through the Pural program paid for by NATO. But this is our weapon. There will be a situation when the US will need to replenish its stockpiles or carry out some missions in its national interests. America's needs will always come first. And this principle applies to every country in the world. The redirection of weapons that were intended for Ukraine can happen at any moment. But so far the Pural program has not been affected by this operation." But that's not all. As Axios writes, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, exchanged sharp statements regarding Russia's war against Ukraine at the G7 meeting. Kallas, in particular, recalled how a year ago Marco Rubio publicly stated that the US would take measures against Russia if Russia interfered with US efforts to end the war in Ukraine. And then a quote from Kallas. "So, a year has passed and Russia hasn't budged. So when will your patience run out?" To this, Marco Rubio angrily stated that if Europeans are so smart, then they should handle Russia's war against Ukraine themselves, and that the US would simply walk away. But Marco Rubio's main argument was that the US isn't supplying weapons to Russia, even though they could. He says, "How are we not putting pressure on Russia? Look, we're negotiating with both sides, but we're only supplying weapons to Ukraine." Well, actually, how are we supplying them? We're selling them? And that's only now because of the war. We might not sell them for use against Iran. Well, I'll quote Rubio. "We are doing everything we can to end the war. If you think you can do it better, please, we'll step aside. The US is negotiating with both sides while only helping Ukraine with weapons, intelligence, and other support." And you know, Marco Rubio also seems to have caught Donald Trump's politics. And in the end, I'll just quote Rubio, where he explains why, in his opinion, do G7 ministers gather for a meeting at all? So, what do you think, before I give the quote, why do you think ministers gather for a meeting? Probably to discuss something there. But Marco Rubio doesn't think so, and now I'll give his quote. "These meetings are often devoted to expressing gratitude to America for our role and recognizing the mediating role we have tried to play in this war between Russia and Ukraine. No one there shouts, raises their voice, or says anything negative." I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And friends, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would of course be grateful. You can do this through donations or YouTube sponsorship. Paid subscriptions on different platforms are also available. Choose any option that's convenient for you. All the links and details are in the description for this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.